the email form.
Just barely let him sit down.
I'm a
Like
freaking
Clint is.
Ranger.
You're on the Ranger now?
Yeah,
I was figuring a tractor.
it was closer to where I was at to just drive on over here. I was on track 10 minutes ago.
Will he
What do you-
smell
what do you
like
see
the
about-
outside?
What'd you see, just if the sun was at the right place?
Yeah, pretty much. I had to drive a track hoe from almost Sanford to Cox Road, and it was
Took a while.
all 3 miles an hour.
All right, we're leaving at 7 o'clock. If you all stand, we'll begin our evening. I'm going to ask Clay Rogers to open us up with a word of prayer and Brandy to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, just ask you would be with us as we have this meeting tonight. We would put ourselves aside, Lord, and put you first in all of our decisions and discussions, Lord. Ask you would continue to bless our school district, our leaders, and give us the wisdom and discernment to guide them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Kilzer if he will call the roll.
Shane Connor,
Here.
Ben Couples. Here. Jeff Harris.
Here.
Becky Hutcherson.
Here.
Clay Rogers.
Here.
Brandy Cherry.
Here.
All present.
All right, we do have a quorum present, so we will officially call our meeting to order for tonight. And the first item is a recommendation to accept the board agenda as presented.
I make a motion to accept the board agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the agenda? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the agenda is set. Next, we have the consent agenda. You have that in front of you. If we have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Make a motion, we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. There is no discussion on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved. Our first item tonight is a delegation, and we do have one delegation here tonight. Mr. Jay Johnson is here regarding his family's attempt to enroll his son in kindergarten for the upcoming school year prior to meeting the age requirement. And Jay, if you want to come forward and share with us this afternoon.
Thank you all for having me this evening. I have a packet of things here I can pass around, but I want to, is it okay if I just?
Sure, absolutely.
I want to look this on up. That satisfies me. So, I'm reasonably confident that all of you know what I do for a living, but I'm not here in that role tonight. I'm here as father of Joe Wesley. He is a soon-to-be 5-year-old with a birthday of August the 18th. It is, strictly speaking, on his time of his birth, about 58 hours beyond the deadline the Tennessee General Assembly said is the bright line that has to be there for kindergarten. Well, it's not exactly a bright line. It's a bright line subject to some flexibility on local education agencies, school boards, to set some policies to allow quote-unquote early admission. This document that I've handed you does look like a lawyer prepared it because a lawyer did prepare it because I didn't know what level of preparation I needed to do tonight, so I prepared as though I was presenting a case to a court. And so that's what I've tried to do. There's a summary on the front which kind of gets to the nuts of everything, so it kind of cuts down to the basic part of everything. But I've gone into fairly extensive detail, as you can see in here, as the reasons why I think that the current policy and the application of it is unreasonable, incorrectly used, and why, in this situation, just on the merits of this child alone, he needs to be in kindergarten this fall. You see in the package of things there that you look at the actual academic testing, the cognitive testing, everything that was done in preparation for him. He is more than suitably at the level of more than competent and capable of doing the academic work of school. It's only when you fall back to the second level of things with the application of the DAY-C2 testing where there's any kind of question or issue relative to that part of his ability to be in school functionally. And so And I guess that goes to the emotional and social preparedness of a child to be in school. Well, my child's been in school, and it's not kindergarten, it's preschool. He's been in preschool 4 days a week, 2 separate programs, 2 separate sets of children, 2 separate sets of teachers for 2 years. Every day, full days, just like school would be in kindergarten, 4 days a week as a 3 and now 4-year-old. He succeeded very well. I've included an affidavit in the stack, it's back in the back of all that stuff, from one of his teachers at one of his schools. He attends Noah's Ark Preschool, and he attends Once Upon a Time Learning Center. His teacher at Once Upon a Time was willing and very happily was willing to provide me with an affidavit that talks about this child's academic ability. Talking about children that are young, you don't want kids that are too young in kindergarten. Okay, fine. He's not really too young. In fact, if he was born on August the 15th, you wouldn't have any choice. You have to enroll him. If I make application for him as a August the 15th child, you have to enroll him pursuant to the statute. You don't have a choice. You don't have discretion. You can test your Brigance, you can do your testing, fine. You still have to enroll the child. But if you look at his teacher's affidavit that's in there, she clearly states that he's been one of the youngest or the youngest child in each of his classes in preschool. He's consistently within the top of the academic performance, that he engages with friends, he plays well with others, he listens to instruction, he does all the things that are necessary for success in kindergarten. He learns academic material, he interacts well, he knows how to behave, sit, learn, be receptive to learning, and engage with other people. Those are kind of the primary things that we do, in addition just to the preparation of him as parents and doing things with him to get him more competent and more capable as a almost going on 5-year-old. I've put in information about the history of the implementation of this statute because you know what I do for a living, so I'm going to look at those things. In preparing for being here, I went back and looked at the implementation. It was Public Chapter 991 when they passed, the Tennessee General Assembly passed the legislation changing the school cutoff age date from September 30th to August the 15th. That was in 2012. One, there's a bunch of stuff in there, and I put it in there just because of context of where it came from, where that legislation came from. The primary sponsor of that legislation, and the one that advocated on the floor in the State House, was Representative Glenn Cassida, who, as you'll see in there, there's proof that very clearly that Mr. Cassida is not exactly the most reputable member of that's ever been in our General Assembly. He's got federal corruption charges and things of that sort where he had to resign from office, those kind of things. But if you look generically at his history as a person, he's just a political animal. He pushes legislation that benefited him in some kind of way. But if you look at the floor history of the debates on the merits of changing the age from September 30th to August the 15th, well, originally the statute, when it was proposed, started as July 31st, and they backed it off and came back down to August the 15th. If you look at the floor debates and look at Cassida making the argument, basically every argument that's made from one side of the picture or the other, the Republicans in the State House are arguing that maybe it's a good idea because there's a one-time saving to the state on the fiscal outlay, and it's going to save them maybe between $25 and $50 million to increase the age. The Democrats on the committee were concerned about money in a different way because they were concerned that we're going to have to lay off kindergarten teachers. That was the concern. That was the debate. It was all about money. It had nothing to do with kids. Finally, when it gets onto the floor in the House, one representative stood up and challenged Representative Cassida, who by that point in the House is a very much established power player in the political side of things. And challenged says, are there any empirical studies about the merits of this? And he talks, well, different states are all over the board different ways and this, that, and the other. I've heard from teachers. That was the limit and the extent of the application that he gave. I've heard from teachers that they think it's a good idea. Is it a good idea? I don't know. But one thing they didn't do in passing it was actually look at studies. Never presented anything on the floor, never showed anything else. The representative that asked him about that said, do you mind pushing the bill, rolling the bill to another day so we can get some data in to look at it and make a logical decision about it? He said, no, I'm not interested in rolling the bill. And then goes through and it gets passed, largely on political lines at that point. Fine, it's the law. But keeping in mind the application of that law is what the statute is. It's passed, fine, is the law. It does give the local education agency the authority to be flexible within that same window from August the 15th to September 30th, though, and that's the flexibility that I'm asking you to use here today. The next line of things I've got are concerns and problems I have relative to the manner by which this local education agency implements its concerns relative to early admission of students that fall into his classroom, in his age range, his birthday range. I've looked at it, I've studied it, again, I've dug through, again, hours of legislative history. I've dug through mountains of research on education history, about age for education, entry into school. Looked at the instruction manual, the examiner's manual for the deployment of the testing that was given, the Day C2 testing. My assessment of it, just based on the words of the authors of the test and based upon the examiner's manual that they gave, says that the policy that was implemented by the LEA shouldn't have been the policy. It's arbitrarily high. It's incorrectly administered and utilized in the wrong way, just based upon the words of the examiner's manual itself. If you're flipping through my fairly lengthy package here, that kind of starts at around page 9. But if you look at it, I've clipped out excerpts of things that come through from the examiner's manual. Page 11, you'll see there are 5 separate tested domains on the Day C2 testing. As my knowledge, my son was only tested on 3 of those, most of which are based upon parental responses to a survey. That's a lot of it. And parental input as far, or knowledge about what that involves, is none, essentially, walking into that assessment. We don't know as parents going into it as parents, we're not given any indication as to what the nature of the testing is going to be, what it calls for, what it's looking for, clarification of what the policy and the reasoning behind the test and the reasoning behind the way it's scored. We're not given those things. But more importantly, getting to the point on that particular testing, you look at top of page 12 on this package, and it's got language that I've clipped out of, again, the examiner's manual, the instruction book for how to run this test. The Day C2 has 3 major purposes. If you're looking at the 3, the last 2 don't apply to anything on this situation. But the first one is to help identify children who are significantly below their peers in cognitive, communicative, social, emotional, physical, or adaptive behavior abilities. Well, clearly B and C don't apply in this particular situation. It's not monitoring progress for any kind of intervention. It's not being used as its own kind of research tool. It's being used to help identify children who are significantly below their peers. Well, what does significantly below mean? Well, if they're in the average category, you would assume that average means they're on a par and on equivalent with their peers. Significantly below is not just a few points below, it's way below where their peers would be. Logically, that's the only thing that can mean. And the policy internally about the scoring of that test requires, for successfully being able to early enroll a child, a scoring of 115, which the board's, or not the board's policy, but the LEA's policy says requires a superior score. You're requiring excellence, not just average or even above average. You're requiring superior to let a child who might be minutes from being on the age cutoff to be in, who would be otherwise readily comparable with his peers. The test is designed to identify kids who are significantly below their peers. One thing, just based on the testing, my child is not significantly below his peers. He is at or above, he's above average on the cognitive and social emotional score range of the testing score. And he's in the average range, even though it's kind of the middle range of that average range, on the adaptive behavior. So he's clearly not below average in that situation, but he's below the superior level of score. You're expecting children to be already not really not needing kindergarten, so let them into kindergarten, is what you're basically saying. You're saying these kids are already so well-adjusted and so educated and smart that, yeah, okay, he's 4 and 11, 12 years old, but no, we're not gonna let him into kindergarten. We're gonna wait and make him come in another year, when in reality, the only kid that can get in that part is the kid that probably doesn't need kindergarten academically anyway. Probably the kid that could be starting in first grade at that point. So it's diminishing returns, and it's not the best. But to my understanding, the cut that was done based upon his scoring was based upon that one set of testing, that particular identification, below this 115 number that was apparently somewhat arbitrarily set, because there's nothing indicating any kind of specific policy other than the fact that this is the number we decided to pick. But nothing as far as the means by which it was selected, the reasoning behind it being selected, or otherwise. And because of that, I want to point you to very, very important language from the examiner's manual on that test. It's the bottom of page 13. I cut it out there because it says exactly what I feel about this. It goes to the first part there saying, we created a test that's been well standardized and regulated and studied, and we think it's a valid tool. It probably is. But line 3 of that bottom section there on the bottom of that page says, you should interpret its results cautiously, especially when making diagnostic and eligibility decisions. Because of time restraints or other reasons, we too often base our diagnoses exclusively on the results of a single test. And this is the language that actually just popped out to my eyes, and I could not get off of it. This is a hazardous practice that should be avoided. Not just that it's not correct, not just that it is, it's not ideal or best practices or anything. It's hazardous to do that. And that's what's being done here. We're taking this one test in one moment and saying this child can't go to kindergarten this fall and he's got to wait for a whole other year. That's what it says. And it's wrong. It's wrong, and I'm asking the board to apply some common sense and logic to that. At the tail end of things here, where Representative Cassida didn't want to bother with the empirical studies, I went and actually looked for those, because there are studies in that field about the merits of early or late admission. Parents have started delaying even a kid that would be 5 doesn't have to start at 5, they can wait till 6, and it's academic redshirt, right? So that's what they call it, and that's what they call in the literature about it. Some of it's affirmatively chosen that way, but the other side of it works too. There's an article from the Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis Journal. The article title is, Does the Age That Children Start Kindergarten Matter? Evidence of Long-Term Educational and Social Outcomes. I've put the abstract in there, I didn't put the whole article, it's like 50-some pages. It's a very long, very in-depth, and well-researched piece. The authors went through at the time noting that there's been some studies with mixed results about the short-term impact of early admission of children and whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. It's mixed. So there's no consistent answer as to what the immediate from the time they're in elementary school is. But the longer-term track record. They look at the long-term study that they did. Quote, the results of the analysis consistently find no advantage to being older when entering kindergarten. And in fact, younger students were consistently more likely to attend college, and in most specifications were less likely to have a child out of wedlock, whatever the merits of that is. But that's what it is. It's things that show that early admission, when it's reasonable and appropriate, makes sense. It's good for the kid. It keeps them in school longer. They reach further along their academic trajectory before the year when they can actually drop out on their own choice if they want to at 17, right? They may have actually completed high school at that point. And so they've got that portion of their schooling finished by the time they're able to get out if they wanted to on their own. And then there's some other parts. They basically indicated that the results of their testing on that part of it were consistent across different models, different subpopulations, and it's at the same time comparing students of both age and kindergarten entry and possibility of repeating grade, we found that there was no benefit to delaying kindergarten until age 6 for children with equal probabilities of repeating a grade. Essentially, what we're saying is that my child would not be able to start school until they're basically 6. I mean, he's basically right at 5 when school will start this year, and he's right at 5 or 6 if he'll have to wait another year. And then also, this goes back to the point about the DC2 testing or any kind of testing in these assessments. This says, overall, these studies indicate that a reliance on readiness tests may result in incorrect placement of many students. Readiness tests may provide valuable information for teachers, but they do not provide a reliable prediction of success in kindergarten and beyond. What are we doing relying on those as the exclusive metric for who can come in that fits in this classification window? There's additional studies that are in there that I cite also relative to the merits of early or not. There's an article from the Harvard Business School there where they study it more from a educational and economic impact situation for our workforce and things like that. And it says, they talk about the increase overall about the age of school entry and that it's largely due to legislative changes, which is what the situation is here. And they talk about those changes and they can't understand it, and they say, this change is remarkable given the strong evidence that in the United States, starting school later decreases educational attainment. Then why would we do it? Well, go back to the policy-making decision when the legislature passed the statute. It was all about the money. It was a one-time savings of $25 to $50 million. And no merit, no educational merit. But you got wiggle room because they gave you the flexibility to make decisions for your kids in this county. That's what you got the flexibility to do. I've seen, my daughter is in 3rd grade. She is 9, going on 10 this fall. She's clearly outside of the range that even flexibility would say, says that she could have been in school at kindergarten. Should she have been in kindergarten before the school year where she could have started if she were born in August? Yeah, she could have been. She should have been. She wasn't. No fight there. Not making that argument that she should have been. Now I see that she's more than capable of the work that she's doing in 3rd grade. She's actually more than capable of the work would do in 4th grade. Because, frankly, every day I ask her how school was, and she's fine. The only thing she talks about in school are enrichment classes that she's in and recess. That's about the only thing she talks about. Those are 2 things she likes. I think everything else is boring. I think you're stifling her just because of the statute, not the fault of the schools. That's what that is. I don't want to see that happen to him. Children, I think, need to be continually pushed on academic learning. And if they're put in a position where the learning is already there, it becomes boring for them, that's when you have behavior issues. That's when you have lack of care or focus about school. That's one thing I'm trying to prevent for him. I don't want to delay his entry to school because, one, he's old enough and mature enough to be able to handle it. It's his next logical step of things. If you don't allow him into school this fall, he's got nowhere to go. He can't go back to the preschool programs. He's already successfully completed both of those. They're preschool, 4K, pre-K, kindergarten readiness classes. He's done with those. He's done. He's a good kid. He's smart. I'm not saying he's a genius, but he's smart. He knows the things he needs to know to get into kindergarten. Does he know how to change the oil in my truck? I wish he did. I'd let him do it. No, he's a smart kid for a 4.5, almost going on 5-year-old. He's a smart kid that can do those things. He can act reasonably. He can sit calmly. He listens to teachers. He respects the teachers. He has friends. He makes friends. He plays well with others. What else do you need him to do to be able to be in kindergarten? Other than to be born 58 hours earlier than he was actually born. If he had arrived on his due date of August the 13th, we wouldn't be here. And you wouldn't have any testing or control over the ability to let him in. All I'm asking the board to do is deploy some reason and common sense. Look past what is, I think, admittedly flawed testing, flawed protocol, and look at the reasonable merits of everything else in the school.
Does anyone have any questions for Jay or feedback for him? Thank you, Jay. You want to sit? Does anyone have a comment or action to take upon the presentation that was made tonight?
Well, the testing,
the paragraph that you alluded to on page 13, where it mentions it being hazardous. At the very end of that paragraph, it also says that tests don't diagnose, well-trained professionals do. So, I mean, I would consider, just like your affidavit from where he went to the Mother's Day out, I mean, I take all that to merit. But at the same time, you know, there are other students that asked for this, that we told no. And, you know, there could be a breaking point where it started, but at the same time, I trust our professionals to do this testing. And, you know, whether the date is, you know, you're not arguing the date so much as the testing. Is that what you're?
You mean the date of his birth, or the applicability of that? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, you said if he was born on the 13th, you wouldn't even be here.
No, because you'd have to admit it,
Okay, yeah,
because you don't have a choice to admit it.
that's right. But going early, the cutoff date is missed it by 58 hours. The other students that we had told no, you know, they may have been more than 58 or less than 58, but they were told no. And, you know, I don't doubt his ability, but I also believe in the testing, you know, your opinion of it, my opinion of it. I feel like it was done by professionals to some degree. I mean, I think our teachers, if they use this, whether you could find the background to who come up with how to deploy it, I trust the teachers to administer it in Chester County to some degree.
The teacher did not administer
Well,
all
Amy,
of the portion that we are basically contesting was not administered by one of the teachers. It was a self-assessment given to me. I was handed 2 different assessment forms, and I got less than a minute of guidance or instruction on how to fill it out. I was told, answer. The test was formatted, there was a series of statements, things such as your child can do this, they can do that, they're capable of this. And I was told to respond 0 for no, they can't do it, yes for they can. I asked Ms. Black, who was in charge of doing the assessment, basically how strict do I get?
Yeah.
You know, he did it one time, you know, or is this something he needs to be able to do consistently? Oh, well, just maybe the majority of the time. That's the amount of guidance I got to interpret these statements. And these are some very, nuanced statements. I mean, some of the things that, you know, and some of the statements I answered negatively to because they fly in the face of, accepted safety standards. One of the things was, could he unbuckle or buckle his own seatbelt? Well, I don't know. I've never allowed him. He's 4 years old. That's pretty well in violation of, he's still in a 5-point harness restraint because that's what the state of Tennessee's child restraint law requires. So I answered, honestly, I answered no. But why should he be penalized for that? But I got no guidance from the instructor. So when you talk about it being administered by the instructors, the cognitive portion that he successfully achieved the appropriate level, the cognitive portion was administered by the teacher. And I have no contention with how that was performed.
well, that's what I was getting at. What portion of it did you do?
We have there's no contention with how that was formed because he was given a series of questions and tasks to complete. It was objective. He either did it or he didn't right there in front of her face in real time. The part that we're contesting of the DAC is the social and behavioral and the adaptive. Because those are based off a self-report given to me. So imagine yourself as a parent, you know, you get handed this questionnaire and you're told you get about a minute's worth of guidance on how to answer this. And it has some very nuanced questions. Like another example of questions, can cut his own food, including meat. Well, he can cut soft foods that I give him, that he can cut with a fork just fine. I haven't given the 4-year-old steak knife to see if he can go to town on a fillet. So, you know, I don't know. I answered truthfully because, again, I've been to school. I've had training in taking tests. I was trained that if any part of the statement's false, the whole thing is false. That's how you take a true or false test, which is essentially what this was. So I said no. Again, now that's another thing where he was being penalized for something that isn't really, I mean, he might be able to do it. There was another question that asked about his ability to cross the street by himself and know to look both ways. Now, I don't know if he can. You know, he knows how to, you know, abide by our personal family safety rules for how we conduct ourselves in a parking lot and around other vehicles. He does that just fine. But I've never set him out at the corner of Crook and Main to see if he could cross the street by himself, and I would like to see how apoplectic half this town would get if I did. So, those are the things that's the point where I'm debating it. Some of these standards and these questions that I was asked to respond to don't apply because they either don't apply for our own family's personal safety standards or actual accepted, legal safety standards. But the other problem is that there was no analysis of what was given to me. So when you're talking about letting the professionals do what they do, there was no analysis. I filled this out, and then I got a phone call going, didn't do good enough. No one sat down and said, okay, well, you said he can't do this, like at all, or there was no contextualizing. None of this was put in any kind of context. And I guess I made the full mistake of trying to be as accurate and honest about, what is actually happening. While I believe that he can probably cross the street safely, I've never seen him demonstrate it, so I didn't attest to the fact that he could. And that's what this is boiling down to. That's where we're questioning the validity. It's not that, the portion that was administered by the trained professional, no problem with that. No problem with that. And not just because he successfully completed it. It was administered in a proper, objective fashion that actually evaluated skills that he could demonstrate in front of the instructor's face. The only portion that is withholding him from being admitted on this early admission exception is the scores that have been based off of the 2 self-assessments that were given to me and that were not evaluated and were not interpreted by a professional. They were taken on their face with no context. That's where the major issue is. And to give you an example of how it appears to me, I'm a healthcare professional by training. This is essentially, the way this was administered, I know we've all been into a doctor's office and you've taken a health history where you've been asked a lot of yes/no questions. And things like, have you ever fainted? Well, you go through and you answer too many yeses or too many nos, and your doctor, without even sitting down, goes, I'm sorry, I can't treat you. You've got there's too many nos, not enough yeses. Now, if you've answered yes to fainting spells, have you ever fainted? Well, you could have fainted in the front yard, mowing your yard because you got overheated, or you could have a serious cardiovascular condition, and that symptom can show up. And your doctor needs to speak to you, and your doctor needs to ask you further questions before they make a diagnosis about your condition. And that's the major issue that we have, is that we basically got a questionnaire handed to us with minimal guidance and also no information and no understanding of the significance it was going to play in the decision-making process for the system. Like how weighted it was, and none of that. We were not given any idea of its relevance or its significance in the decision-making process. So That is also the other issue that we're taking up with it. It's the lack of information and understanding given to the parents to be able to fill this form out effectively and accurately. Because, I mean, I filled it out honestly, but I don't feel like I filled it out in a way that accurately reflected my child's capabilities. Just because some of the things don't apply. Some of the elements that were questioned don't apply for numerous reasons. And that would be the point where you would have an instructor sit down and do the equivalent of your doctor taking you back into the office and asking you, okay, you marked this, tell me what's going on. That's what we did not get. There was no interpretation, there was no context given to it, there was no, like, well, he can't do this, but this is why. It's not because he's developmentally incapable, it's because I'm personally trying to keep him from doing it for his own safety. And that's the problem that we're having, is that the only portion of this assessment that is restricting him from being admitted early is this section that was given to me with no instruction, with minimal, like a very minimal amount of instruction or guidance on how to complete it, and then no follow-up interpretation or context or analysis afterward. I was told he didn't hit the right number, and tough stuff, see you next year. Sorry for you. That was it. There was no, like, we want to review this, or come back in, let's sit down and talk about this, or let's do something different, or let's, you know, there was no, it was just kind of like, you know, and as a mom, I mean, you know, this isn't, I'm not doing this to, you know, make myself feel better, but as a parent, but specifically a mom, the idea that my misinterpretation or my desire to be excessively, like, honest and not fudge things a little is going to cost my kid for the rest of his educational career. I mean, that's more than just a little bit of mom guilt laying there. You know, that's more than just a little bit.
That's a little drastic to me. I think, we're not saying he can't go to school, ever. He's going to school next year. I tend to disagree because my daughter, her birthday is August the 7th. We lived in the state of North Dakota. You can't start school there until, you have to be before August the 1st. So it's July the 31st, the rule that we used to have. And she has excelled. And I think it's because she's more mature when she started kindergarten. And she's always ahead. She's excited about learning. She's always engaged. And the best student, I hope my kids aren't watching, but in my family, like, she can outread some of her older siblings. And it's, to me, a lot of it is just because she's a little bit older, you know, and grasp things faster, better, easier, however you want to put it. But she's excelled, I think, a lot because she was a little more mature when she started. And, you know, I understand you're upset about the test, but we didn't make the test. Our school system didn't make the test. That test is there, and that's what we have to go by, and he failed the test.
No,
So,
but see, the thing is, we can't get any kind of documentation on who selected this test, what the criteria was to select it, whose decision, who said we're gonna use this test, who in this room, in this board, in this school system said, this is the right test for this is gonna give us the best answers. We've asked for that information, we haven't gotten it.
right.
And but we don't know whether that's because it doesn't exist. We don't know. I just want to know, if you're gonna put this much stock in it, I want to know that I want to know that the due diligence was done to make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. And all respect to your personal experience with your daughter, I'm glad that that was your experience. But we've had an opposite experience. This one had to sit and wait because her birthday was in December. So there was no pathway to get her early. Did I know deep down in my mama heart that I think she could have done just fine if she was allowed to enter? I do. But I also knew that there were policies in place, and we chose to abide by those policies.
Right.
Now, I did that still with concerns that it was going to have an impact on her through the course of her career in school. And this is the year that I'm seeing it happen. I have watched a marked decline for her enthusiasm for school. And it's all from a point of it is a point of boredom. It's like, it's the same thing that we did yesterday. Just doing the same thing again. And I was a kid in Tennessee public schools who got throttled back in a way that didn't help me. I know what that can do to a child's motivation. Because at some point she's going to realize that she can just coast, and her desire to achieve is going to go out the window. Now, fortunately for us, with her, that hasn't manifested itself in behavioral issues or classroom behavior problems. But again, I don't know if that would be the case for him. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. Our primary contention with all of these circumstances is that it is every bit arbitrary. Somebody snatched it out of thin air. These dates were snatched out of thin air. And like my husband said, there was no, when the state General Assembly decided on this date, they just pulled it out of thin air. Kids in Tennessee had been admitted to school. I think, was it November the 1st was the date for the longest time? I know that's what it was when I entered Tennessee public schools, and it was that for a long time. So so much of this is just snatched out of thin air. Somebody just said, this is what we're doing. All we're asking for is the documentation on where everybody said, this is why we think this is the best tool. Why did we choose the day C? Why do we choose it? And why do we set this particular number? Why do they have to reach this number? What's the data? What's the research? What is that says that if they can meet this, it's an indicator of success? That's the only reason that we're continuing. Is that everything, so many parts of this, as we have done our research, just appear that somebody, somewhere, whether it was a representative in the state legislature, it was someone, in the school system administration, on the board, somewhere down the line, there are a lot of things where these things just got snatched out of thin air. Because there's no documentation where these standards were established, why the day C was chosen, why this number was set, and why it proves that it's a good indicator of a child's success.
Well, I'm just gonna say, with his cognitive domain being above average, and he's 58 hours. If he was 58 hours older, he'd start school, And, cognitive it's above average, so it's not like he's delayed in any way. And only you can attest to his maturity. If you think he's mature enough, we have no idea if he is or not.
I do. And again, I did, that's why we got that statement from his preschool teacher, that he knows how to function appropriately in a classroom environment. He understands classroom culture, he understands the structures, the schedules, the rules, what is acceptable behavior. He's already been very acclimated to that. And he already has, he has all of the independent skills that most kindergarten teachers hope that their children come to, which is they can feed themselves, they can put their own coat on, they can put on their own backpack, they can toilet themselves independently. All those basic things that, you know, doesn't have the kindergarten teacher using time for those, you know, those skills, because a child is lacking those skills. He has those. I'm sure it was listed here. He scored a 96 out of 100 on the Brigance, which is the assessment that you all apply to all students entering as your placement. You know, so he based on what you're using to, based on what you are using to evaluate his, you know, peers that are, like I said, 58 hours older than him or more, he's right up there. And then, and the DAYC, the cognitive portion of the DAYC, which is the objective portion of it, you know, he also, I mean, that goes above and beyond what is expected by the Brigance. That one requires higher order thinking even, you know, that requires actual, like, that's not just identification, it's actual, like, reasoning and, like, deductive skills. So he's having, I mean, he is, cognitively, he is functioning at or above where his peers should be.
But the test is to test life skills, like,
But you didn't test it, you asked me.
and you answered the questions.
I answered the questions with basically no instruction on the nuance. Do you have a copy of that?
Were you given the test just like every other parent?
No, every other parent's not given this test. Only the children who are seeking early admission.
That's what I'm saying, every other parent.
I don't know if I was given this by every other parent, because I've not been able to
Frankly, I
contact.
think the policy is that we don't talk about the DAYC2 with parents because
It's a
maybe
big
it
secret.
corrupts the testing model. Maybe that's the diagnosis, but if parents can't understand what is required, then basically what you got is a complete barrier where you're paying lip service to the idea, yeah, if your kids can do some things, then maybe we'll let them in if they hit this age range. That's all it's saying. It's arbitrarily set, the number on this test. The decision to make this the test that's the standard, there's no indication as to the policy making, the thought behind it, who was involved in making the decision, and why that was the decision that was made. Are every other parent given the test? I don't know. I assume that's the case. But I don't know because, one, they don't talk about it. It's one of those things like Fight Club. We don't talk about it until you dig into it and try to figure out what's going on.
And even then, it's exceedingly difficult to get information.
It's going into something blind that genuinely a test is given at 7:30 in the morning on a random Thursday with no kind of, hey, this is the idea of things that you might be doing coming into this evaluation, is something that determines the course of his academic progress for the rest of his life. Meaning, if he doesn't start kindergarten until he's 6, that pushes him a year later. Great. He may be, I'm sure he'll be smarter in a year than he is today. I'm sure he'll be more functionally capable than he is today. He'll be a year older. Okay? But can he do kindergarten work? That's the real question you have to ask. Academically, you can see the parts on the academic side of it. It's very clear that he can do the kindergarten work. He can do everything that's required in kindergarten now, probably, without actually going to kindergarten. And so putting him that much further behind puts him that much more further behind academically and growing and learning and doing more things. Can he handle social skills and sitting in a classroom all day? Look, he's been sitting here for an hour, largely just kind of minding his own business, being quiet, calm, and peaceable. He's a 4-year-old boy. He's rambunctious from time to time. He's a 4-year-old boy. But when the situation calls for it, he sits here. He does this. We're relying on a decision-making to be made by someone who has no genuine experience with this child. No further thing. The testing should really involve, hey, we're going to have a series of things. All of them will be weighted in different ways. Different kinds of testing that we're going to go through to assess whether this child, if you genuinely want a real assessment of whether he's ready for kindergarten, there's only a handful of kids in this county any given year that this is going to apply to. Just so happens that mine is one of them and I'm here today. I think the current way it's done frankly, is garbage. And I'm just saying that. It's not saying that the people are garbage. I'm saying the policy that is in place is garbage. The people are probably well-meaning. What I'm saying is the way they deployed it is not good. It does not allow parents to understand what's going on. And ultimately, the board and the schools and the teachers serve the stakeholders that are parents and the children that are in schools. That's the job, is serving the people who elected the board, who are running the schools independently, teachers, principals, administration. That's the responsibility and accountability back this way. You got the right and you got the obligation to give us something that we can understand. It's something that's more than just, here's this test. Here's this test. And if you don't hit this number that we arbitrarily pick, then tough luck.
Any other questions or feedback for Fanny?
Dr. Judd is here too. I can speak.
Yeah, if you would like to, on the,
Dr. Judd, do you want to, I can speak to one thing. I can't, and I don't doubt that Jay Lance has done the research. I know in state government, of course, that could be to point to what Ashley has described about the arbitrary selection. And I don't doubt it, because often laws are either won or lost based on the fiscal note. So you're right. I would not argue that point. I would say, based on what was the arbitrary choice to choose this one, of the people, and I thought I had mentioned this to you, but forgive me, we had our supervisor of special ed services, Melinda Parker, as well as Dr. Jill Faulkner, our assistant superintendent, who when they read this policy, and again, the policy comes straight from Tennessee Rules and Regs, it was to find something that would satisfy that one line that says, if the results indicate that the child is sufficiently mature emotionally and academically. So with that basis, yes, there is no one test that satisfies that. You have to go find it. And I know from my conversation with Dr. Jill, they had asked several school districts what he'd use, several bits of feedback. I know that much. I can answer that part of your question, actually.
just, let's allow Ms. Judd to just share from the local angle. Yes.
Sure, well, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, but I highly respect those that are, and that can defend and do things. You've done very well tonight, very valid points. However, as an educator, I do feel that our educators are very highly qualified to do the job that they're here to do. And I believe Ms. Black did a very good job. I was not there to see it myself, but I trust her and I trust the process that she did this with fidelity. And based on the criteria that we have, the child did not meet every score based on the criteria. So I personally feel like, what is the point of having criteria? Because if we break criteria or change it for one child, we would have to change it for every child that is applied to give every child that same equal fair access. So I'm just asking you to be fair and equitable, whether you feel that it's best to serve this family in this way, or if you feel that our criteria in this district is sufficient.
Can I speak to one of the statements that Ms. Judd made? I'm not, my contention with this and our family's issue with this is on behalf of the other families who we don't feel, they probably had a similar experience to us. Now, obviously, their children may have done very poorly. Their children may have, performed well below what is considered even average. And that's fine. But I think what I'm saying is, I'm saying the test is bad. I'm not saying the educator is bad. And I'm not saying that Ms. Black did anything wrong in her administration. I'm saying she didn't do any administration on the day C. The portion that I filled out. The portion that she did with him, just fine. I felt like she was patient, she was kind, she was understanding, everything that you would expect from an educator. And saying that, can we do something, if we do something for this family, what's to say that we shouldn't do for another? What's to say that you shouldn't? What's to say that you shouldn't give these other families another chance to be reevaluated with a better tool? Maybe everybody's gotten a raw deal here.
One thing else I would point out as well, go back to this is the lawyer going back to the statute on early admission. Early admission. I use that term, it's a ridiculous term to use, because we're talking about children that are within 6 weeks of an arbitrarily set date anyway. So kids are either ready for kindergarten or they're not. But the statute under subsection, it's 49633001, part, let's see, B2B. It says, notwithstanding subdivision B2A, if the director of schools finds through evaluation testing at the request of the parent or legal guardian that a child who's 5 years of age before September 30th is sufficiently mature emotionally and academically. Sufficiently mature. Sufficient. What does sufficient mean from a logical standpoint? Sufficient means good enough. It means it's adequate, sufficient. Well, what you're doing is saying that this school system's decision about children who fall into this 6-week window of time, sufficient requires exceptional, superior, beyond their even age reasonable range level of performance to secure those scores. You're saying, you're equating what the statute says sufficiently with exception. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to any of the kids that fall within this classification. Any kid that has testing scores on these tests within a reasonable range of average to above average anywhere should be well and reasonably considered, or further considered in some additional kind of way. If you got genuine, said, well, this is really close to this, but let's ask these other questions. Let's think about this way. You've got a bright line metric where it's being applied in a situation where it's not appropriate to apply it, according to the makers of the test that you're using to apply a metric that's arbitrary. You can tell that I'm reasonably passionate about this. It's my child. I feel like this is the correct thing for him. It's not the correct thing for me, it's the correct thing for him. I'm not making decisions for me. I've already done my schooling. I started in Chester County Schools when I was 4 years old. I didn't turn 5 until October the 30th of 1979 when I was in kindergarten in Miss Joey Brewer's classroom at East Chester, where she paddled me. Miss Spring was the only teacher that ever paddled me in school. I started school in Chester County, went kindergarten through high school in this county. Part of the reason we came back to this county and we decided to start having kids was to have access to this school with people we knew, teachers and assistants we trusted, and we're getting run over here is what we feel like. With something that we have no knowledge of. It's like it's a hidden thing, and there's a standard that is effectively unattainable. Effectively unattainable. You're asking for kids to be like 2nd, 3rd grade quality level, academic, social, well-behaved, etc., to get into kindergarten. Can you expect how unreasonable that is? And all I'm asking the court, sorry, oldhabits.org. All I'm asking this board to do is apply some common sense and reason. You know what? Sometimes, guess what? You may have parents that want to ask this question again. You put down a hardline rule that says, if you're going to do that, just put down a hardline rule that says, you know what? We don't want any kids at all that are over age, after August 15. And that's your local rule. And don't bother with any of the other show at trying to do something genuine within that window. Just say it's no. Absolutely no, full stop, no. But that's not the policy. The policy is, yeah, we're going to at least consider it. Well, you're going to consider it meaningfully. And I feel like it's not meaningfully considered. So.
Can I ask Mr. Judd a question?
Sure. Go ahead.
In past years, do children pass these tests?
This is honestly my first year in this role.
Does anybody
so
know?
I've never done
Does anybody have any insight to that?
Has it been passed?
This, all I can speak of is this year, and the attention has been since I got the conversation with Mr. Johnson. But we have had 3 others to take the same assessment, ranging from scores close to passing but not passing. Passing some, just as Joe Wesley did, passing a portion of it, but not passing all 3. But now, I have not seen the scores. I don't know the children. And again, I get what they're saying, but there is an intentional, not for the detriment of the family, but we don't, and Jay Lance actually spoke to this. We can't, air out our test choice. Because, just like he's done, anybody can go on Google and do
Research.
research.
Yeah.
And there may be selections of questions included on the research that could be assessed. That's why these matters are not for general public knowledge, because of that situation that you could find to lose the validity of the assessment piece to do what it's supposed to do. But, again, Ashley and Jay Lance have been very articulate. Their arguments are very strong. Here, Steve.
Yeah, respect, I'm a black and white person. I totally respect your presentation. I respect what you said, personally. If you have a barrier, there's a reason there's a barrier, but there are exceptions at times, and it's a tough spot for us all to be in. And what I can do at this point as chairman is ask if there is a motion to be made or not on this situation. We've had a lot of discussion, and I think the sides have both been accurately represented. And I certainly understand your case and respect it greatly, and that I just understand that from the system's point of view, there is a reason, there is a bar set, but is there not a space for an exception to that? That's going to be ultimately up to the board. So, and to do anything further on that, there would have to be a motion made. So I can open the floor for that, or it can not move forward. Anyone? And making a motion doesn't mean you're for it, it just means you're allowing it to go to the floor for a vote or not, so. No one?
Well, honestly, I mean, how many students, other than this young man, this year took the test?
There have been 5 students who have applied. 2 of them have taken the exact same screening as they did. There's 2 levels. There's the first screening, which is for GANTS, that they all take, and then if they score high enough or at the bar or above, then they take the DAISY 2 assessment. And 2 students, Bill Leslie was one of them that took the DAISY.
Well, I mean, I wish they had both excelled and passed. I mean, your argument tonight is very, very, I mean, like I said, articulate, compelling, and I wish I understood where the dates come from, because I clearly don't either. I mean, nobody at this table, like Clay mentioned, we didn't choose the dates. But, I mean, we do have, we can vote on it, but, you know, next year when it happens again, we're gonna look to the administrators to give this same test again, because, you know, that's the test we use. However much gray is involved, that's, you know, and that's beside the point until somebody above us changes it. I mean, that date, we can't change the date. We can,
I'm not asking you to change the date.
I'm
Because
asking you to use your discretion that you're given to allow my child to start school in the
correct,
fall.
but my argument is if we do it for him, do we continue to do it? Like Shane said, black and white is easier for a board.
If you have a parent that wants to come here and make an equally compelling argument, then yes, I think you should.
Yeah,
Ms. Judd has said that there's only 2 parents. You're not swinging some floodgates open to the school system. And 3 of the children that she stated, 3 of them didn't even make it past the first phase of testing. And the Brigance is another one of your objective tools that you use. So I accept the validity of that. Like I said, it's, they're theoretically this year, if another set of parents wanted to come here and make an equally compelling argument for you, you would have had to have allowed 2 extra children into school next fall. And that's probably about the range that you would probably have. And that's only if you have a parent who feels that they have a compelling enough argument to come stand before you. You know, some parents may not want to, they may not feel that strongly about it. They may not want to invest their time and their energy in that direction for their children. We did, and we do.
I mean, the board does have discretion. You do have that power. The fact is, test or no test, you have to look at a child and say, are they ready or are they not? And even, like Jay appropriately pointed out, even the tester says, it's more on the human witness of the child rather than what they mark on a piece of paper. So that's kind of what we have determined by what the information has been given. So as board chairman, I'm going to make a motion to bring to the floor that we allow this student to enter our school system in the fall, out of what I've heard tonight. You have the power to second it or not, but I feel that the case has been made, and by my witness of the child tonight, based on the, and I'm basing it on that, and the first test, which is he ready academically, because I see the behavior, and the fact he's already, what does he do in the fall, since he's already completed all other options in the community of a place for him to go? That was a powerful statement for me. He has nowhere else to go. He's completed Mother's Day out. He's, you know, you put him back in daycare, that's kind of what I take away. I'm not pressuring anyone else, I just wanted to share why I feel it's a strong enough argument to bring to the floor. It's fair enough to at least have a vote on it.
I second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
I appreciate the effort that you've put in to advocating for your child. No matter how this turns out. I have a child that's gonna spend most of her senior year as an 18-year-old. And you know what? Personally, I'm great with that because I have another year, hopefully, that my child is at home. And when she was 5, I got another year to go to the park with her. And just that time I cherish with her. And so personally, I'm struggling a little bit I understand why you want him to go ahead and start. But personally, I was glad to have that extra time with my child.
I'm not trying to pawn my child off on anybody else so that I don't have to spend.
You just do what you feel is
I
best for your child.
understand, and I feel like you
And I
know the
respect the fact
maturity
that
of your
maybe
child.
we value different things in our child's development.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and I think you know the maturity of your child, better than anyone else.
And that's another, what I base my motion on. Any other questions or discussion? The motion's been made and seconded. All right. Do we need to do a roll call vote? Or?
I don't think so.
Okay. All those in favor of allowing this student to enter the school system this fall, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
Thank you for your time and your consideration. We really appreciate it.
But I have a 9-year-old that has another day of TCAPS and needs to get to bed, so we are going to.
That's fine. We need to transition to another role, so that's good.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right, next on the agenda we have tonight is celebrations. And tonight we are celebrating the educator survey that has taken place statewide and the response from our Chester County staff. And Mr. Kills will dig into that, and we'll be presenting some awards for that tonight as well.
Well, as you see in your board packet, every year we gain a lot of insight, and we hope that the effort to inform our teachers the value of their feedback is utilized by our districts and school leaders. So what we have done in the last, I think this is our 3rd year, to incentivize this teacher educator survey. It has gone out to all educators, full-time educators across the state. There are some opportunities. The state actually incentivizes it much to a smaller scale, that if you reach a value of, I think it's, well, I'm unsure. I know if you reach a value of 40% participation, you'll get data back from the state. It's valuable data. It's a lengthy document. The survey takes 15 to 20 minutes to complete. There's a survey for our educators, full-time educators, and a survey for our administrators. Again, we began to incentivize this a few years ago. our numbers have continually to increase. And again, and I won't go through because you've got this in your board packet, and I've been sharing this to our school leaders each week up until the date that it closed, which was Friday a week ago. That our school district as a whole was number 2 in the state as far as data coming back. We had a 96 participation rate. That's the second highest in the state. Number 1 highest in the state was Lexington City. Of course, they're a very small school district, so it didn't take them as long. They didn't have the number of teachers, educators that we do. As far as administrators, of course, we have 12 administrators in all of our schools. We had 100% participation of our administration, and that put us number 1 in the state as far as overall participation rate. So what we've done is we have informed our educators who complete this that if the school itself gets a 90% or better participation rate, then every full-time educator in their school would be included in a drawing for 20 $50 chamber buck packages. That has been a very popular gift that our educators for the last several years have been giving us a lot of positive feedback about the benefit. It's not just a ham, it's not just a country ham or a spiral cut ham or a turkey, but it gives them the opportunity to go and shop wherever. And, you know, we like the fact that as the sign used to read, shop local, it did promote more local shopping, and that really benefited us during the COVID years when everything was shut down anyway. So, what I've got on the screen is just a random number generator. What you have in your packet is a list of 204 educators. That includes all full-time educators and the 12 administrators. So it is, in a sense, the luck of the draw. I can't say if you, the only winners are those who are present, because that would, we'd have 3 winners in the back. No, yeah, 3 winners in the back. So anyway, I've asked Shane to serve as the name reader, unless you beat him to it.
That's right.
But I'm gonna, you will see in just a second, the range is from 1 to 204. And then I'm gonna be tallying, because we gotta do this 20 times. But again, it's, should be visible. And hopefully those who are selected are watching on, what are we on? YouTube, right, okay. So the first one is 139.
139 is Christy Pennington.
Somebody getting those names?
I'll
Okay, you
circle,
circle,
yeah.
thank you. Okay, number 2, 126,
That would be Kayla Moulton.
okay? Number 3 is 165.
165 is Jennifer Smith.
Number 4 is 102.
That would be Sandy Lewis.
Number 5 is 171.
Gerald Swain.
Number 6, 177.
Misty Thomas.
Number 8, 176.
Haley Thomas.
Number 9 would be 125.
Rachel Morris.
Number 10, 154.
154 is Elisa Scott.
Number 11, 179.
That is Sandy Thompson.
Number 12 is 80.
80 is Michelle Hopkins.
Number 13 is 160.
160 is Jennifer Showers.
Number 14 is 116.
Colin McPherson.
Number 15 is 90.
90 is DeJuan Johnson.
Number 16 is 165.
I already had that one.
Oh, wow. 183.
Amy Turner.
Number 17 is 139.
139 has already been pulled.
Okay. 183.
Already been pulled.
Wow. Thanks for the insight there.
92.
I feel like I gotta give the disclaimer. I'm pushing the buttons, all I'm doing. I'm not just arbitrarily calling out numbers.
92 is Jason Judd.
Okay. And number, this would be number 18, would be 94.
Richard Carnes.
19 is 29.
29 is going to be Keisha Cherry.
And number 20, last one, is number 11.
Number 11 is Heather Bates.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it.
So those teachers and leaders will be receiving sometime this next week. I'll go ahead and say a quick plug that next month is Educator Appreciation Week, and we've got some plans in store for recognizing our educators and leaders next month. That's in next week? I mean in May. Next month in May is when Educator Appreciation Month is. So we'll be celebrating with them soon.
All right. Well, congratulations to those, and we'll move on with our next item. And it is actually the first draft, look at approving the first draft of the 2023-24 general purpose budget that you have in your packet. And I'll, Troy, speak to that, and Stacy's also here if there's any questions. So.
Okay, for those of you who are familiar with Stacy's presentation, she does provide you information regarding what has been already developed. Now, again, a reminder that we are basing this budget proposal, this draft, based on right now only 2 estimates. Again, we have information from last school year of what the initial estimation of what the TISA budget would offer for this year. I mean, for this year's planning budget, which will be for the 23-24 year. We got our first estimate in February. We've gotten the March estimate. Here we are, the 20th day of April, and we're still waiting for April's estimate. March came in on the 31st at the 5 o'clock hour. So to stay true to a March estimate, it came the last few minutes of the day. But again, based on our numbers, the information that you have in your cover letter as far as the changes overall, the bulleted items, we feel like that our budget can promote the proposed 7% increase to the SOAR 2.0 salary schedule. Remember, that's one of 2 salary schedules that we maintain. Right now, that is the significant majority of all but one educator is currently being paid with the SOAR Classic, the one that we started with several years ago. But you have information on the cover letters, and then you have the details of the revenue and the expenditure. Again, all these are projections. And again, a reminder also that these projections have to have board approval as well as county commission approval. We are waiting for more data to come from the state for federal budgets before we take it to the county commission finance committee. But they are in the process of meeting now to discuss these across the county. And we're not asking for any additional revenue outside of what we're already been entitled to from our county. And we feel very confident that as it reflects the estimates that we've had for February and March, if there's no dramatic change different on the negative side, that these are areas that we can have these proposed increases confidently.
Is there a motion to bring this to the floor for a vote, the approval of the first draft of the 23-24 general purpose budget?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made by
Can I win
Vince,
one?
seconded by Brandy. Is there any discussion, questions? Anything you want to add, Stacy?
I did want to add that I also have the budget
Tuesday or Wednesday of this week.
All right. Any other questions, sir? All right, motion's been made and seconded. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor of approval of this first draft, say aye. Any opposed? All right, it is approved. Next, we have a recommendation. This is something we have to do annually, and that's to approve the out-of-county tuition rates for the upcoming school year. And we have a proposal on that, and I'll have Troy speak to that as well.
Included in your board packet, again, was not only the information in your agenda, but also the policy 6.204 that just, again, provides the support for what Mr. Shane just shared, that each year we do consider the rates. Again, as we described, well, let me just say this. Right now, currently, the rates have been fixed for the last 2 or 3 years, I think, 3 years maybe. The rates are $600 for the year for one individual student who's out of county. If you have 2 or more children joining Chester County Schools, it is $900. Again, there's a vetting process that is included for the first timers. This vetting process includes a check on their academic performance, their attendance performance, and their behavioral performance. We receive information from other counties of the county where that child, or the school district where that child went to school, and then we consider if this is a child that will meet the satisfaction of our proficiency in those areas, and also for available space for that age group. Those are gathered by Ms. Carroll through the month of June, and then at the close of the month of June, we end early or out-of-county registration as an opportunity, and we give letters, individual letters of acceptance or denial based on those 3 factors and size and space, available space. Reminder also that for every student that comes into Chester County Schools, again, that student generates resources for the school district that we use for revenue purposes. That dollar amount is now set with the TISA model. The TISA model has I would say 4 components like it used to, but it's really just 2 components that are factors that we consider. It's the base, which every student at a minimum will generate $6,860. The second one is a weighted level, which part of the weights come because they're enrolling in Chester County Schools, because we are considered a rural district, which they use the term sparse. You also get a specific dollar amount per student enrolled. So again, when you look at the rates that you have for out of county compared to private schools around us, it's much cheaper. But when we are not aspiring to, well, I'll just say this, the revenue source that we get from out of county tuition is very minimal. We do not count on that in any capacity to pay salaries or to make those major expenses. But we do generate a lot of revenue through the state and the local because of the ADM number, the average daily membership that goes up as more students are enrolled in Chester County Schools. But to be respectful of what we've been dealing with and the inflational rates that have gone up, it is my recommendation, and again, just simply for me, that my recommendation is to keep the $600 the same for the individual, because again, it does match up with what our district portion of property tax is. It's really equivalent to that $600 amount. I asked Lance Bailey, Lance Beshears, not Bailey, excuse me, Lance Beshears, who collects all this, what's the average rate, and that percentage that the school district gets of the property tax, it's close to that $600 amount. So for every individual student, that is a pretty good equivalent, pretty good measure, justification. But for students who are, or families who have more than one student, I recommend that that number goes up $100 to $1,000. You still get a benefit of it, because if you just paid a flat $600 per student, families of 2 or more would pay it.
I'd have to
more
get
than
another
$1,000.
job.
Or just live in Chester County like you do. There you go.
All right, is there a motion on this approval of the recommendation for the out-of-county tuition rates for the upcoming school year?
I'll make a motion. I didn't fully understand it. I thought that was all that they had to pay, but at our conference, when you told me and explained it, I'm in agreement to do what Mr. Kilzer, Coach Kilzer has recommended Doctor. He wishes.
That's right.
Second.
All right, motion's been made by Clay and Ben has seconded. Any other discussion or questions? If there are none, all those in favor of approving, say aye. Any opposed? All right, they are set for the upcoming school year. The last thing we have is just anyone that has updates, or Mr. Fields may want to share a bit on his monthly vision review. And then after that, address any questions on different committees or projects.
Well, and I'll just speak briefly, and I don't know if Ben or Dr. Clay wants to speak to our meeting today with capital projects. But just to share briefly, a few weeks ago, I sent out an initial information around this opportunity for local community stakeholders to be involved and active in a planning of what their perception of a Chester County graduate would look like. That portrait of a graduate work, this is part of the Innovative School Model Grant that we have received, have been awarded, and part of that funding is to set the vision of what we want that student to be. What kind of productive citizen do we expect? And I sent that information out based on the Chester County Chamber, their list of emails of industry, businesses, and community leaders, government leaders, as well as district, school leaders, some school staff who would be involved. I've yet to include a part that I will include, which is students. Recent graduates will include, but also those who are still students, because they have a voice into what they're aspiring to be. Look forward to the opportunity. The cutoff date for that was this past Monday, I believe. And we've had over 30 reply back in the positive, which, talking to the person who is going to facilitate this work, he's done this all over the nation, and he has said with our size school district that having a group of 30 to 40 people would be, on the average, a good group number. So we feel very confident that we've got a good group to start the meeting process with, and that will begin in August. It'll be August of this year, but during our start of our next school year. We will have 3 meetings. After the close of the 3rd meeting, we'll have culmination from the facilitator who will take the information shared over those 3 meetings, and for the October board meeting, there will be some proposal for you as a board to ratify. And that ratification will then, as I shared with you a few weeks ago, that will form the basis of our strategic plan. And then from that strategic plan that ties into this Portrait of a Graduate work, it will also tie into our district plan and the subsequent school improvement plan. So we'll have more unification and more partnership from top to bottom, and hopefully with the involvement of our community more engaged rather than just only being involved while their children are students with us, they'll see the efforts that we're trying to raise the bar with what our students are going to leave Chester County High School with, which is much, much more than a diploma.
Do you guys want to share anything from capital projects?
We met with the architect and we had a budget. We're trying to condense it. He said he was gonna take the changes we made today, which was very, very rough, but the first initial squeeze, he's gonna massage it a little bit and bring it back before, present it to us. And everything was pretty well, everybody was on board and in agreement with what was discussed, so it looks like it's
This is the meeting that had some of the faculty involved.
correct.
Right?
James Carter
Yeah.
and,
Clint Isbell
Clint Isbell
and DeJuan
and
Johnson.
DeJuan Johnson. We're all present.
And Clay Merlin.
Clay
Merlin.
Merlin, Britt Eads.
Correct, yeah. Edward had set in for our project manager. He was unable to attend. All the discussion was clear and everybody was on the same page for the most part. Looks like it's
Yeah, Doug Short said he'd
Off to
have
the
us,
races.
some preliminary drawings for both facilities within a week, which is when we picked Doug Short.
It's good.
All right, does anybody have anything else with questions about that's ongoing in the school system, or anything else to come before the board?
I would make mention, I received this from Dr. Jill at the, pretty much just at the midnight hour before the meeting. I didn't know whether to expect these people to be here, but this evening, I guess reflected in just the YouTube video, we've got several of our staff who are recognized for certificates of participation with a group called the Comprehensive Educational Resources. They're based out of East Tennessee. It's funded by the Niswonger. That's how it started, Niswonger Foundation in East Tennessee. It is a group across the state, primarily in the eastern part of the state, but several school districts on the west side have joined into this partnership. Part of the reason because the benchmark assessment that we use, which used to be called the CASE assessments, now it's called Mastery Connect, we all invest in that same benchmark. So it's really useful when you think about thousands and thousands and thousands of kids all across the state of Tennessee utilizing the same resource as far as for testing purposes. You usually get a much better rate for the cost of the test rather than just shopping it per district. When you can say, we're shopping for about 150,000 kids, what kind of rate can you give us? And the fact that we all have these frequent, I think it's monthly, or maybe it's less frequent than that, but it's approximately every month, meetings with the CER staff to reflect on the outcomes all across the state with the same series of assessments. It's been very beneficial for us because we learn how others are taking the data and utilizing it. It has helped shape our usage of the results and not just check a box that we've done it. So these, I feel like I'm compelled to call out their names since they're not here, if that's okay. These are who will be given a certificate of participation, and after the board meeting tomorrow, we'll provide these to those staff members. Christy McManus at the junior high, Charity Cook, she's at Jacks Creek, Dr. Belinda Anderson at the junior high, Christy Pennington at the junior high, Ben Odom at the high school, and finally Miss Leanne Skaggs at the high school. Those receive certificates of participation from the CER group, and we'll make sure that they get these next tomorrow.
Anything else? All right, we will mention, the scheduled date on the packet is May the 18th. We have had a board member with a conflict. So, if everyone will check their calendar, we'll tentatively set that for May the 11th. Is that okay with you? As far as you
I
know?
think last year we did it early too.
Okay, so, May the 11th.
16th, I think, has been.
Oh, did y'all change your mind?
Yeah, I think.
The 11th, Clay's gonna be out of town.
Okay, so 16th is okay with everybody?
I believe so.
All right.
Everybody but you.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
May's great. Bring birthday presents. May 16th is.
Is that your birthday?
No, not that day.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's a
Well,
month-long
it's gotta be on your
celebration.
birthday.
Our next meeting will be right here in the conference room, then it's May 16th at 7 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned.